Week 2 of the NFL season is almost in the books, and we're here to recap every single Sunday game that happened, going over the fantasy implications and looking past the numbers that you see, past the fantasy points, past the box score numbers to properly inform and equip ourselves to make the best decisions moving forward. Sometimes when we see those numbers pop, we see this guy scored 15 points or this guy scored only 5, we freak out and overreact to it when we need to look a little bit beyond those numbers. So we're going to kind of get into it with some guys in today's video. It is Monday afternoon, midday, and there's 2 Monday night games that haven't wrapped up. So I'm sure a lot of fantasy matchups haven't wrapped up. And we're not going to be talking about those games, obviously. We're talking about all 13 Sunday games that happened yesterday. And in this video, we're talking about 6 matchups. And we'll put out another video where we talk about the other 7 matchups. So as always, we're just going to get right into it. If you would like this video and subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic. It goes a long way in helping us. And always leave your comments. If you have any questions, drop waiver wire targets, start sit questions, leave them in the comments. I will get back to you. So we're starting off with the Packers at the Falcons. This was a pretty good game. Falcons ended up winning this game. And there was definitely some fantasy implications in this game. So we'll get right into it. We'll start off with the Packers. Jordan Love was inefficient, but put up a solid game because he had 150 yards passing, 3 touchdowns though. He also added 23 yards on the ground. He actually scored 20.3 fantasy points. It was a kind of a crazy week for fantasy scoring, specifically for the quarterbacks. 20.3 points was QB 16. I think for most weeks, that's going to put you close to the top 12. But he is QB 2 on the season. You know, he's a guy, in my opinion, in one quarterback leagues. If you want to roster a second quarterback, I said this going into drafts, like he's a guy I was targeting if I were to take a backup quarterback, just because he has upside and kind of the unknown. I'm going to take him over, some of these Mac Joneses of the world. So they were kind of going in that same range. So I definitely think Jordan Love, if you have Anthony Richardson, who maybe will miss a week, or you have guys that are disappointing a little bit as your QB1, it's possible that Jordan Love could be someone to hold on to and start. Like if he's gonna put up these kind of numbers where he's throwing 3 touchdowns every week, which won't happen, but he has a good coach, and his coach is gonna put him in the best situations possible. So I definitely think if you have an early bye week for your quarterback, or you got a quarterback that's injured or something, or just not performing, hold on to Jordan Love for now and start him depending on the matchup. So Packers, just double checking who they're playing. They are playing the Saints next week, so not the best matchup, but they do get the Lions and the Raiders the 2 weeks after that. So that's kind of when bye weeks are starting. I believe week 4 is when they play the Lions. Yeah, week 4 is when they play the Lions. And I believe that's when bye weeks start. So, those week 4 and 5 matchups against the Lions and the Raiders are really good matchups if your quarterback's on a bye. And then he gets the Packers, it looks like in week 7. So, solid player. I would most likely be holding on to him unless I have pretty shallow benches. The running back spot, it was kind of all AJ Dillon, 15 carries, 55 yards, 1 catch, 8 yards, 6.8 points in half PPR. By the way, all these rankings and numbers you hear are based on half PPR scoring. That was good for RB24, 6.8 points. That's pretty pitiful for the running back position. If you listen to any of the past episodes, I'm very against and was always against AJ Dillon. I thought he was basically the most expensive handcuff in the history of fantasy football. And this guy has had a ridiculous amount of opportunities to show that he's a good player, and he's just not. Last year, again, he had 12 games of double-digit carries. He had 1 game with over 75 yards on the ground. This year, kind of the same thing. All right, AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones is out. AJ Dillon's going to smash 15 carry, 55 yards. He's not a good football player. He's really not. I just don't think he's very good. He'll have value if he gets this volume, but it's just pretty bad. There's really no other way around it. Romeo Doubs, 2 catches, 30 yards. A little bit of a disappointment there because a lot of people started him this week. He did have almost over 75% of the snap share, so he was out there, but it just wasn't. I don't know. It just wasn't. it just wasn't useful for fantasy football. I'm a little worried as you look at the other receivers in this game. Jaden Reed had 4 catches for 37 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dontavian Wicks had 2 catches for 40 yards and 2 touchdowns. Luke Musgrave had 2 catches for 25 yards. I'm just a little bit worried that this is going to be a little bit of a wide receiver room where the ball is spread out a little bit more. So I'm probably going to bench Romeo Doubs next week, even though I was pretty high on him this week, especially if Christian Watson comes back. I just want to see how that wide receiver room is going to shape out. I was kind of expecting Doubs to be a pretty solid PPR target, PPR guy, just, can get 5-6 catches every week, but I don't know. We'll see. Give it another week. Don't freak out. Don't drop Romeo Doubs. I probably wouldn't pick up Jaden Reed, but unless you're in a deeper league, I would kind of, especially with Christian Watson coming back. And then Luke Musgrave, you can probably drop him at this point. Like, I don't think he's going to do enough to move the needle, and there's probably better targets out there on the waiver wire that you can stream for tight end. One interesting note from this game is Jaden Reed, his ADOT, in week 1, his average depth of target was 18.4, so he was kind of being used as a downfield guy. It dropped to 4.8 in week 2. So if they do start using him more in like a smaller ADOT, which is more likely to get more catches, then he can be intriguing. But if I'm in a shallow team, a 10-12 team league, I'm probably not going to be rostering Jaden Reed unless he kind of goes off for another week. On the Falcons side, Ritter actually threw the ball more than 18 times. He was 19 for 32, 237 yards and a touchdown, 1 interception. And I believe he had some carries on the ground as well. He was the QB10 this week, so that's good for Ritter, but in 1 quarterback leagues, he's not going to be rostered. Still, don't roster him. Bijan Robinson, man, it was awesome to see 19 carries, 124 yards, 4 catches for 48 yards. He was the RB7 without a touchdown. If you get these guys who can be top 10 guys without touchdowns, you have someone special, because touchdowns will come. And even if you don't get the touchdowns, you still have the possibility to be a top 7, top 5 running back without touchdowns. That is pretty insane. Tyler Algier, we kind of saw what it was like without the touchdowns on the ground. He's not going to get many catches, if any. Obviously he'll get some, but he's not going to get many. He had 16 carries, but only 48 yards. So disappointing if you started him. You got to kind of approach Tyler Algier, I think, as like a boom bust running back that he's touchdown dependent. He needs his touchdowns, but we'll get into the snap percentages and stuff. He does have that possibility. I'll get into that in just a second. Drake London, nice to see a bounce back here. I was kind of on the need to bench Drake London train because is this offense going to pass the ball? So what we've seen is in a game where they're not controlling the game, they're not beating that team, they can't control the clock as much and just run the ball, they have to pass the ball. Drake London is viable guy. So he's going to be wide receiver 3, flex worthy in my opinion. He had 6 catches, 67 yards and a touchdown. So that's kind of all you want. Like, if you can just get that from Drake London, you're fine. He's totally fine. He's going to be a top 25, top 30 guy. No problem. So the guy to be concerned about is Kyle Pitts, man. 2 catches, 15 yards. He's the tight end 26 on the season, averaging 4 points a game. Jonnu Smith outproduced him. Man, we're getting close to sounding the alarm. I'm still going to give Kyle Pitts another week at least. But man, if he puts up another 1 or 2 weeks like this, I'm fine with just moving on and finding. I was in this boat last year where it was just painful. You had to start him every week because of where you drafted him. I drafted him really, really high, and it just didn't work out. So still give it another week or 2, but I don't blame you if you want to just maybe not drop him, but find another tight end to start. Like, I'm not going to argue with you at all. So the interesting note on this game is for the running back position. Well, one thing, the Falcons had 30 more plays this week, so they weren't able to just chew up the clock and run the ball. They had like 78 plays compared to 48 in week 1. So this is why all these numbers for Bijan and Ritter and London have all increased, is because they just had more plays. Bijan had 45 snaps compared to Tyler Algier's 22. That was with them solo on the field, and then they both had 14 snaps where they're both on the field. Algier is still the goal line back. He has more goal line snaps than Bijan Robinson. I think he had all the goal line snaps, actually. If I remember correctly, I will quickly look that up for you. Tyler Algier, he has 3 of the 4 goal line snaps. So he is the goal line back. Algier is still the goal line back, but Bijan's the 2-minute drill guy. So you can rack up a lot of points in the 2-minute drill. And just because Bijan's not being used on the goal line doesn't mean he can't score touchdowns. Obviously, he can score a touchdown from anywhere on the field. But the point is, Algier, you're going to get weeks like this, these 16 carries. You're going to get a lot of touches. It's like, okay, how many running backs can you kind of bank on getting 15 carries? There's not many, or 15 touches. There's not many, honestly. Tyler Algier is one of them. However, yeah, he's going to need touchdowns, in my opinion, to produce or to bust off a long run. So just kind of keep that in mind. I don't think he's a must start every week, but he can be a solid flex play, especially during bye week. So moving on to our next game, we got the Raiders at the Bills. Kind of what we expected here. The Bills had a bounce back week. We'll start off with the Raiders, though. Jimmy Garoppolo, just kind of a great Jimmy Garoppolo stat line, 185 yards and a touchdown and an interception. Josh Jacobs, man, 9 carries for -2 yards. Holy crap, that is terrible. There's some stat lines for running backs that I haven't seen this year. One of them was last week with Cam Akers, or I haven't seen ever, I should say. One of them was last week with Cam Akers, like 22 carries and 29 yards. I don't know if I've ever seen a player get 20 plus carries and not get over 30 yards. 9 carries from -2 yards is another stat line for a running back that I don't know if I've seen before. He did have 5 catches for 51 yards, which kind of saved your week, to be honest. Like, it's not a good week, especially from a guy that you maybe drafted as your RB1. Not a good week, but like, he didn't completely bust in a half PPR league. Like, he's still giving you close to 8 points there, or 7.5 points. So there's that, I guess. Devontae Adams, 6 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. His wide receiver 16. So again, doesn't kill you. It's not what you want from Adams, because you drafted him as potentially your wide receiver 1 for sure in the second round as your wide receiver 2. So you expect more. And I do think Adams will be better as it goes along. He left pretty late in the fourth quarter, I believe. Evaluated for concussion, so just monitor that. But he had a good bounce back week from his week 1. Kristen Wilkerson, by the way, was the replacement for Jacoby Myers. It was Wilkerson and Adams out there in 2 wide receiver sets, and Renfro obviously when it was 3 wide receivers. So a name to keep in mind if Jacoby Myers misses significant amount of time. Not much else really on the Raiders, man. Just nothing interesting to talk about with the Raiders. Just very disappointing stuff, and a little concerning because you have studs in Jacobs and Devontae Adams on that team, where you're kind of expecting these guys to produce and be top tier players for you, and they haven't been. So, but yeah, moving on to the Bills side of things. Again, really good to see a bounce back week here. Josh Allen, very efficient, 31 for 37, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 carries, 7 yards. QB7 on the week. I do think it's interesting to note that they had a lot of red zone goal line plays and snaps, and they didn't really run Josh Allen. He only had 3 carries, but I kind of thought this going into the season that potentially Josh Allen was going to run the ball less. Just the moves that the Bills made and bringing in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, big backs that can just run in between the tackles and smash it up the middle. I thought, it's like Josh Allen going to get less on the ground now. Like, I'm not saying he's going to completely stop. We saw it week 1. He was still running like a madman. But is he going to drop from like that 700-yard range to that 500-yard range or 450-yard range? And then around the goal line, are they going to want to kind of not have Josh Allen? The goal line is you're going to get hit if you're running the ball up the middle on the goal line. Like, whereas other parts of the field, you can get away with it. So I just think it's just interesting to monitor. It's going to cap his upside a tad bit. He's still good enough, obviously, to put up top 5 quarterback, top 7 quarterback numbers with his arm. I just think if he's not going to do as much on the ground and get those rushing touchdowns, which is a huge part of his game, his fantasy game, it could cap him and maybe limit him as being a top 3 guy, which is kind of where we all drafted him as the quarterback 2 or 3 this year. So just something to keep an eye on. James Cook, man, I didn't really get to talk about it too much because they had the Monday night game, but I was super excited what I saw from James Cook in that Monday night game, where he I just realized I look pretty crooked on the screen. But anyways, I was really interested to see that the James Cook usage on that Monday night game against the Jets, where he had, I think, 65% of the running back carries and a 15% target share. And I said, man, if he gets that, he's going to smash. All right, I'm back. If you notice, I moved those pictures behind me and made me look like I was crooked, and it was kind of tripping me out. But anyways, back to James Cook. I mentioned it after the Monday night game, even though his fantasy numbers weren't looking good. And this is where you need to look beyond the box score, beyond what you just see on the fantasy number. James Cook is the perfect example of this, because you probably saw after their week 1 performance against the Jets, 8.3 points in half PPR. I'm going to bench James Cook. But what you didn't realize is he had 65% of the carries for the running backs, and he had a 15% target share. And I said, if he gets that every week, he is going to absolutely smash. And he did. He had 18 points this last week. Looked good on the ground, 17 carries, 123 yards. 4 catches, 36 yards. He was the RB10 without a touchdown. We just talked about that with Bijan. If you can get to that top 10 running backs without touchdowns, that means you're a really, really good player. Now, James Cook is probably not going to get too many touchdowns. They are going to bring Latavius Murray, Damian Harris, and you still have Josh Allen at the goal line. Those are going to be the goal line guys. That kind of no question here. But he's good enough, as we saw, to be a top 10 guy without a touchdown. So I love James Cook, love that usage. Gabe Davis had a bounce back game, 6 catches, 92 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs was, not Stephon Diggs like number, 7 catches, 66 yards. It's not killing you, right? That's giving you 10 half PPR points. That's fine. That's not going to kill you. If this is his floor, then you're going to be fine with Stephon Diggs. Dalton Kincaid, 5 catches, 43 yards, tight end 16. Interesting note on the Kincaid stuff. I know people are super high on him, but Dawson Knox, when they're out there in 11 personnel, so 3 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end, it was Dawson Knox who was out there majority of the time and not Kincaid. And that's going to really severely hurt Kincaid's numbers. So essentially, if it continues like that, Kincaid is only going to be able to produce when they're out there with two tight ends. And I just don't know how often they're going to do that. So I'm fine with dropping Kincaid, to be honest. He's just another tight end that you can kind of play the streaming option, and maybe as the season progresses that changes. But for now, if you're holding 2 tight ends and one of them is Kincaid, I would drop him for just another position player to give you some upside there. I think that's it for this game. Oh, Cooks, yeah, I mentioned it with James Cook. He's not the goal line back, but he is on the 2-minute drill, and the 2-minute drill is where you can just rack up. Austin Eckler is the king of 2-minute drill stuff. You can just rack up 4 catches on a 2-minute drill, and it just saves your fantasy week. So I'm just, super excited about James Cook. I'll be completely honest. Moving right along to our next game number 3, we have the Ravens at the Bengals, one of the better games, I'd say, closer games of the week. Ravens do survive and win this game. Actually, I don't think it was as close as the score says. I forget exactly, but it was a good game. Starting with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, better than his week 1, 237 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he also added 54 yards on the ground. Those are, Lamar Jackson-ish numbers. Hopefully that's more of the floor for him than the ceiling, the QB9 this week. I think you're kind of hoping for, maybe a little bit more in the rushing yards or more touchdowns overall. But again, if this is the floor for Lamar Jackson or whatever, you're fine. You're not going to do anything. You're still starting Lamar Jackson. The running back room, Gus Edwards had 10 carries, 62 yards and a touchdown. Justice Hill had 11 carries, 41 yards, three catches. They were both top 24 running backs this week. We're going to get into that because this is another one of those where you see the fantasy score or you see the box score and you may be influenced a little bit, but it's Gus Edwards. He's the better guy. But we're going to get into that in just a second. Zay Flowers, not as good as his first week. 4 catches, 62 yards. He had a carry for 6 yards. I'm still pretty high on Zay Flowers. They've proven, I think they had back-to-back plays where they got the ball in his hands. They want to get the ball in his hands. He's going to get bubble screens. He's going to get carries, and I think he already has 3 carries on the season. So he's going to get 4 to 6 touches every week, in my opinion, at least, and he has the ability to bust one off. So he had a big catch in this game, which kind of saved his fantasy week. So if you started James Cook, you're not overly disappointed. I mean, you're not super excited necessarily, but you didn't get a complete bust. Nelson Aguilar was the best receiver for this team. 5 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. Rashad Bateman didn't do much. Odell Beckham got hurt and left the game, so we kind of have to monitor that. And then Mark Andrews, his first game back, 5 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. He led the team in targets, 8 targets. He was the tight end 3. He's Mark Andrews. This is why you drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd round. He's going to give you top 3 tight end weeks more often than not. So yeah, going back to the running backs, an interesting note that I wrote here. It looks like, from the box score, Gus Edwards had a better game. He got the touchdown. Justice Hill had more snaps than Gus Edwards. Not a whole lot, but he had 11 more snaps. Justice Hill was the early downs guy. He was the goal line guy. He was the short yardage guy. He was the 3rd down guy. He was the 2-minute guy, 2-minute drill guy. So he had more of the value touches. It just didn't work out this week. So if I had to start a Ravens running back, I don't want to necessarily, because I do think it's going to be this kind of split. I do want to start Justice Hill though, because if he's getting the goal line and he's going to get 3 catches, like he had this week, then he's going to have the better fantasy finishes. And Gus Edwards is kind of like the between the 20s guy. So if I had to choose one of those guys, I'm actually going to choose Justice Hill, even though he had a worse performance. But I don't want to start either one of these guys, to be honest, especially when we're not even at bye weeks yet. I hopefully have other guys that I can start. The Ravens did rotate the receivers a bit more. Rashad Bateman was Odell Beckham's replacement, not Nelson Aguilar, even though Aguilar had the better game. So just keep that in mind again. Like, don't necessarily fall for the Nelson Aguilar. Oh, he was wide receiver 21 this week. He had over almost 15 or 13, 14 half PPR points. I'm going to start him, and then you get 2 catches for 30 yards next week, because he's not out there on 2 wide receiver sets. He will be out there more, obviously, with Odell Beckham's hurt, but just keep that in mind. If you want to add him, you have a deeper bench, go ahead. I would not start him this week because it seems like it's going to be – actually, I would prioritize Rashad Bateman over Nelson Aguilar if they were both on the waivers, if I'm being completely honest. And then, Zay Flowers, one of the things, his ADOT increased from 2.6 in week 1, average depth of target, to 12.6. So they're using him downfield a little bit more. So I still like Zay Flowers. Like, he's going to be a wide receiver 3/flex play, especially during bye weeks. I just think he's going to get like a safe 4 to 6 touches every game. And he has the ability to take one to the house whenever he touches the ball. So I like that potential. Onto the Bengals. Man, are we getting worried about the Bengals and Joe Burrow? Like, I don't think he's healthy. Obviously, he's not a bad quarterback. I just don't think he's healthy. Super inefficient again. 222 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was the QB 21. This is why I'm against taking these quarterbacks that don't really give you much on the ground as high as Joe Burrow was going or Justin Herbert last year was going, because you just don't have that floor of the rushing. You just don't have it, and it really, really hurts you. So I don't think he's completely healthy. We'll be interested to see. He re-aggravated his calf injury, so it'll be interesting to see if he keeps playing hurt. And if he does sit down even for a couple games, that's really, really going to hurt your Jamar Chase value, because their backup quarterback is Jake Browning, and that's not great for your skill position players on the Bengals. So yeah, I'm starting to worry a little bit about the Bengals. Obviously, I'm not going to bench these guys. Joe Mixon put up kind of Joe Mixon numbers. It's just he kind of needs a touchdown to really put up the top tier numbers. But 13 carries, 59 yards, 4 catches, 36 yards. He was the RB18. You throw a touchdown in there, he's the top 12 guy. That's kind of where you're at with Mixon. Like, he does enough to be a top 20 guy, needs a touchdown to be a top 12 guy in most weeks. T. Higgins had a really big bounce back week. He led the team in targets, 8 catches, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver 3 on the week. Jamar Chase, though, 5 catches, 31 yards, wide receiver 58 to start the year, first 2 weeks. If Joe Burrow is not going to be Joe Burrow like he has been the last couple of years, if he's going to be this 240-yard, 2-touchdown guy, you're going to get weeks like this with Higgins and Chase where one of them goes off, but probably not both of them. That's just the unfortunate reality. Like, we need Joe Burrow to be, Joe Burrow. We need him to be healthy, and then both these guys are top 12 potential guys. But if he's going to be like this, especially to start the year, you're going to get bust weeks from Chase or Higgins. It's just going to happen. So no other interesting note here besides, Mixon was obviously dominating the backfield snaps. So he's going to be a top 15 running back most likely this year. Moving on to our game number 4, we have the Seahawks at the Lions. Geno Smith, we'll start with the Seahawks here. Seahawks pull off the win. I don't want to call it an upset, but the win in Detroit. Geno Smith bounced back. I was worried after 1 week, which is maybe kind of stupid, but I was thinking, man, Geno did not look good. They're missing both their offensive tackles. This could be a disaster. Lions defense is better. And I was wrong. Geno Smith, 32 for 41, 328 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also gave you 20 yards on the ground. He was the QB8. Looked very similar to what he was doing last year with just, getting those good yardage, couple touchdowns, and giving you about 2 points on the ground as well. If you kept Geno, good. He's going to be kind of maybe like a matchup-based. Both these guys that we're going to talk about in this game, maybe matchup-based starters, and he's still a top 10 guy in my opinion, especially after seeing what he did in week 1. So hold on to Geno Smith. And Kenneth Walker at the running back spot, 17 carries, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had a catch. He was the RB10. He's also the RB10 this week, and he's the RB10 on the season. Really good stuff you're seeing from Kenneth Walker. I mentioned it. I made this video a couple months ago about the Seattle conundrum of what do we do with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And I kind of highlighted that, since 2010, when teams draft a running back in the first or second round, when there's already an established guy there, almost always the rookie that was drafted didn't really do much their first year. And we saw from Seattle, a few different cases from Seattle, including last year where you took Kenneth Walker in the second round, yet Rashad Penny was dominating the snaps and carries the first few weeks. So, and then Penny got hurt, of course, and Kenneth Walker came on, but we're kind of seeing the repeat of it's Kenneth Walker, and Charbonnet is a little bit of an afterthought right now. That could change as the season goes along, but I don't really see it changing too much. This is what you're going to get from Kenneth Walker. You're going to get 15 plus carries, and hopefully he can bust off a big one or get some touchdowns like he did today. To touch on Zach Charbonnet, he had 4 carries for 16 yards, 2 catches for 16 yards, so 32 yards total. We'll get into that. There is an important note about Charbonnet, which I'll get into in just a second, but the receivers, you had Metcalf with 75 yards and 6 catches. He was the top 36 receiver. Tyler Lockett is still proving to be the better receiver in terms of the target percentage. Like year after year, Tyler Lockett is this guy. He had 8 catches for 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 10 targets, 4 more targets than DK Metcalf. So Tyler Lockett, man, he's going to return the value once again. JSN, 5 catches, 34 yards. He's looking like a tough. I wouldn't drop him because I think with rookie receivers the potential's there, and if one of these guys gets hurt, then JSN is going to be a really good play. But it is interesting to note that it's an interesting note that JSN is going to be a tough start unless you're in super deep leagues, unless one of these guys get hurt. So nice to see that he's getting 5 catches, but he has to turn that into a little bit more. And then Noah Fant, 4 catches, 56 yards, tight end 13. You're not starting Noah Fant, or you shouldn't be. But so the interesting note about the running backs, Kenneth Walker dominated the early snaps, but just dominated the snaps in general. But Charbonnet did see a role increase, and it looks like he could be taking over that third down role from DJ Dallas. Slowly but surely he is. DJ Dallas had it in week 1, and we saw Charbonnet increase in that in week 2. So if Charbonnet can get to that level, he's going to have potentially some flex value there. And then, of course, he has that value of if Kenneth Walker gets hurt, then he's going to be a smash play. So don't drop Charbonnet, but tough to start him until you start seeing a little bit more. Now with the Lions, good offensive performances for some people here. Jared Goff, another one of those quarterbacks that I think you just kind of hold on to and kind of go, if you have 2 guys like a Goff and Geno, just go by matchup-based Both these guys can kind of go off, but they can both have down weeks as well if they're playing tougher teams because they don't have a huge rushing floor. Jared Goff doesn't have anything for a rushing floor. Geno Smith can get you 1.5 to 2 points, but Jared Goff had 323 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was the QB6 on the week. Montgomery had another good week. I've been telling you all offseason, David Montgomery, he's being undervalued. He's a better Jamal Williams. 16 carries, 67 yards, and a touchdown. He also had a catch. He was RB17. That's what I expected from David Montgomery to be a top 20 running back, and he's kind of proving that. Now, I know he did have the injury. He may miss a couple weeks is what I saw. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Jahmyr Gibbs, 7 carries, 17 yards, but 7 catches for 39 yards. He actually led the team in targets. He was the RB21 this week in half PPR. Obviously, he's a little better in PPR. We'll get into what happened after Montgomery went down in just a second. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 catches for 102 yards. Didn't get a touchdown or didn't have a huge amount of catches. So he was only the wide receiver 32. Wide receiver 15 on the season. I expect him to have to be even better than that. The guy's just really, really good. And he had a good week. 6 catches for 102 yards is a good week. It's just if you don't get that touchdown or you don't get like 8+ catches, you have kind of like more like a wide receiver 3 week, even with 100 yards. Josh Reynolds, 5 catches, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 7 this week, wide receiver 10 on the season. I don't see this changing, guys. Like, I don't necessarily think he's going to be a top 10 receiver, but he definitely needs to be picked up off your waiver wires. I was kind of talking about it last week as well. He's going to, at least for 4 more games, he's going to put up numbers so close to this. Of course, the 2 touchdowns hard to bank on, but even week 1, 4 catches and 80 yards, I think is what he had. You expect 4 to 5 catches and 60 to 80 plus yards, and then his chance to get the touchdowns. Jared Goff trusts him. He's potentially the second best target on this team behind St. Brown. And until Jameson Williams comes back and starts to, not just comes back, but starts to eat into playing time, Josh Reynolds is a start, in my opinion. He is a start, especially in half PPR and standard leagues. Full PPR, maybe there's someone else better out there, but still, like Josh Reynolds, man, you have at least 4 more weeks of no Jameson Williams, and then I don't expect Jameson Williams to just come back and take his role right away. It's going to take at least 2 weeks, I would say. So I think you still have like 6 more startable weeks of Josh Reynolds. He definitely needs to be on your rosters. Clay Freeman caught a touchdown. Nice to see. Sam Laporta, 5 catches, 63 yards. He was the tight end 8. He's the tight end 6 on the season. I think he's rosterable. He's one of the tight ends that I wanted to see if the rookie tight end narrative of rookie tight ends never produce, if that was going to go away this year with Sam Laporta, with Musgrave, with Kincaid. It's kind of going away with Sam Laporta. He's just putting up solid numbers. 5 catches and 50 yards is going to more often than not be a top 10, top 8 tight end, which is what he's done basically back-to-back weeks. So yeah, Sam Laporta could be your starting tight end. I think this is a good team that has a lot of talent. So yeah, keep rolling Sam Laporta out there. So the interesting note on the running backs is before the Monty injury, we did see Gibbs get an increased role. In week 1, Montgomery kind of absolutely dominated the snaps. Montgomery had more third down snaps, had more 2-minute drill snaps. And we saw that change in this week, even before the Montgomery injury. It was Gibbs in on third downs and 2-minute drills, which is why he had the most targets and 7 catches. So that's really good to see. Now, I think a lot of people are going to expect Montgomery's out and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a smash play. I don't necessarily think I think he's going to be a good play, especially in PPR and half PPR. He's going to be a top 20 guy, in my opinion, maybe 15. He has the potential to be a top 12 easily, but consistently a top 20 guy, I think. He's not going to just get 20 carries, guys. I don't see that happening. Craig Reynolds came in when David Montgomery was hurt, and he had 10 snaps after Montgomery went hurt, and that was compared to 13 snaps for Jahmyr Gibbs. And the reason why Gibbs had more snaps was because they had a 2-minute drill in that period of time, and that's Gibbs' role. So I think Craig Reynolds kind of comes in and takes over the Montgomery role. So I think Craig Reynolds is in deeper leagues a stash or a start pick up off the waiver wire. kind of guy. I think he's going to take over David Montgomery. There's a good chance he takes over David Montgomery's role and just gets the 15 carries or so. They don't want to do that with Gibbs right now. They think he's too valuable in what he does, and they don't want to get him hurt. So I think Craig Reynolds, could just be that 15-plus carry guy that's going to get potential goal line carries. He's kind of going to be the less talented David Montgomery pickup. So, I would 100% look at Craig Reynolds if you need if you have Montgomery or you need a running back in the waiver wire this week. Moving on, guys, we have two more games for you in this video. We have the Colts versus Texans coming up. Anthony Richardson was looking like he was going to have his big first blow-up game of the season in week 2. He had 56 yards passing, but he had 3 carries for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. On that second touchdown, he either got a concussion or went into the concussion protocol. Sucks to see. Luckily, obviously hopefully he doesn't have a concussion. Hopefully he's doing well. But in terms of the fantasy side of it, he didn't bust for you. He still put up, I think, 18 points. That's at least 17, 18 points he put up because he got you 2 touchdowns on the ground. So he didn't kill you. Gardner Minshew came in and looked fine. 19 for 23, 170 yards and a touchdown. I think you should feel comfortable in that your skill position players on this team will not suffer if Minshew is the quarterback, maybe even slightly better. So that's always good to know. Zach Moss, man, they really did not, Evan Hall being hurt and Deion Jackson fumbling his opportunity away. That saw Zach Moss play every single snap but one, which is just something you don't see in the NFL these days, is a running back playing essentially every single snap. You just don't see it. Zach Moss did. He had 18 carries, 88 yards, and a touchdown, four catches for 19 yards. He was the RB9. If Zach Moss is on your waiver wire, I would put a decent amount of fab on him. If you need a running back, if you lost Montgomery or a J.K. Dobbins, or you have Jonathan Taylor, especially, I would put a decent amount of fab on him because you're getting a starting running back for 2 more weeks at least. And then who knows with Jonathan Taylor, if Zach Moss keeps looking like this, they could potentially trade Jonathan Taylor if they can't come to an agreement or something. So he 100% needs to be on rosters and needs to be targeted in terms of fab. Michael Pittman, 8 catches, 56 yards. That's the floor for Michael Pittman, in my opinion. He's going to get, and I think he has a little bit higher ceiling with Gardner Minshew, to be honest. But Michael Pittman's floor to me is, that 8 catch, 56 yards. Wasn't great, but it didn't kill you. Gives you almost 10 half PPR points. That's not killing you. I like Michael Pittman moving on. The only interesting note was to talk about on this game was Zach Moss absolutely dominating the backfield. So moving on to the Texans, man, you have CJ Stroud looked really, really good. I know this team was from behind, a lot of garbage time, but here's I'm forgetting the word and the phrase, but I'm dumb. But here's an update for you. This team's going to be in garbage time and trailing a lot this year because it's not a good team. CJ Stroud, over 380 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. That is awesome to see. I didn't write down what QB he was on the week, but I'm sure he was he was QB 13 on the week. So awesome to see, because these pass catchers, which we'll get into in just a minute, they're going to be viable. Multiple guys on this team are going to be viable if they keep losing in games and trailing and have to pass the ball this much. And Stroud is looking competent and looking good at passing the ball. This team's going to have some fantasy guys for sure. Dameon Pierce, man, I'm starting to get nervous about this. 15 carries, 31 yards, 2 catches for 4 yards, RB37 this week, RB39 overall. This is a guy you drafted as an RB2. And basically what they're saying to you is when we're trailing and we're in garbage time and we're passing the ball, it's not Dameon Pierce out there. Man, that's tough, because I think we were all tricked into it. How the Texans were using him this preseason was like, it's all Dameon Pierce. Singletary, no. Anyone else on this team, no. And then the season starts, and it's essentially a 3-headed monster the first 2 weeks of the season. We'll get into that in just a second. But real quick, the receivers here. Nico Collins, 7 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown, man. Wide receiver 4 this week, wide receiver 7 on the season. That's awesome to see. I didn't expect this type of production from Nico Collins, but I didn't expect the Texans to be able to pass the ball this well. So he's a start as long as he keeps producing like this. Robert Woods, 6 catches, 74 yards. That's back-to-back weeks of just being like a solid wide receiver 3 in 3 wide receiver leagues. Robert Woods is looking like a start, like he's not going to give you explosion weeks, but he could just give you a safe 10.5, 11 points with the occasional touchdown to push him over 15. Like, man, again, this team's going to throw the ball. You're going to have at least two fantasy options in this team from the pass catchers. Tank Dell came in. Noah Brown was put on the IR, I believe, and Tank Dell was the guy that took over. 7 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Wide receiver 17 on the week. I really like Tank Dell. If for whatever reason, I don't think Nico Collins is on waiver wires, but if they all 3 of these guys are, I'm actually I'll target Nico Collins first, but between Robert Woods and Tank Dell, I'm taking Tank Dell because I think he has potential to be the top guy for this team just because I really like his talent. He's a really, really talented player. And so I just think like he has the potential to be the best receiver on this team because the guy has everything. Besides the size, the guy has everything you need to be a good, successful receiver in this league. So I would think about picking up Tank Dell. Dalton Schultz, man, I was super high on Dalton Schultz, thinking this guy can lead the team in targets and catches. He's been disappointing, especially seeing these passing numbers from Stroud. Schultz has been disappointing, 4 catches, 34 yards. I'm ready to move on from Dalton Schultz, to be honest. Find someone else. There's someone else better out there producing more. But yeah, back to the running backs, this being a 3-headed monster. Pierce had 38 snaps. Singletary had 30 snaps. And it was not I'm blanking on his name. Mike Boone, who was the 3rd head of the 3-headed monster last week in week 1. It was Daria Gumbawale had 16 snaps. This is a 3-headed monster, and this team's not using Dameon Pierce when they're passing the ball all the time. He's not their 3rd down or 2-minute drill guy, which means that when this team's down, which I imagine they're going to be down a lot this year and trailing in games, Dameon Pierce is not going to have a good game. I'm worried about Dameon Pierce. I really, really am. I didn't like him. I wasn't super high on him going into the season. And then I got kind of convinced from how the Texans were basically saying, like, you're our guy. We don't need to see anything from you. I thought you were just going to give him 70% of the snaps. He was studying film from Alvin Kamara. Oh, man. Don't drop the guy, obviously. But, he's getting to the point where, like, you can question whether you want to start him or not. So, and then that's it for this game. We got one more game to go over in this video. We have the Chiefs at the Jags. We expected this game to be I think it had the highest over-under of the week. We expected it to be a shootout. And just, the NFL showing us you don't know shit. It was one of the lower scoring games of the week. So maybe the lowest, I'm not sure. But it was not, what was it, like 17-10 or something like that? I'm just trying to look it up real quick for you guys. And, of course, I can't find it because I'm put under pressure. 17-9, maybe the lowest scoring game of the week. Off the top of my head, and as a quick glance, I think it was actually, which is kind of crazy. It just shows you cannot predict what's going to happen in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes was still Patrick Mahomes, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, interception, 7 carries, 30 yards. He was QB 11. Like, this is Mahomes' floor. It's still a top 12 guy, so nothing to talk about there. Isaiah Pacheco, kind of the definition of a trap back, man. A guy that doesn't catch the ball. And at the goal line, this team does not just hand the ball off. They do a lot of creative stuff. 12 carries, 70 yards. Like, he looks good running the ball whenever he gets the ball, obviously, over 5 yards a carry. But the problem is, like, he could have games like this where he gets 12 carries. And it's like, even if you average 6 yards a carry, it's like, that's still like 8 points, And it's not losing you weeks, but it's not winning you weeks. So, he was RB22, and, obviously he's going to be flex worthy, but it's just tough if we see him get back to what we saw in week 1, where he was getting 3-4 catches, then okay, you're fine. Because you'll get the 12 carries for 60 yards, you'll get the 3 catches for 30 yards, and you're putting up a double-digit fantasy week, and then you have the occasional touchdown appeal. But just a little. He's kind of a trap back. Sky Moore, bounce back week, 3 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Was wide receiver 23. I think I read that 12 guys on this team had a target. And that just means like you're not going to be able to rely on any of these receivers. They're all boom bust flexes at best. Sky Moore is a boom bust flex, in my opinion. Like you can get a week like this where you had 3 catches and one of them was like a 50-yard touchdown. But then if you take that out and you don't get that, you get 3 catches for 40 yards and you're disappointed. So they're all just, if you're going to start a Chiefs receiver, they're going to be boom busts. So Justin Watson, 3 catches, 62 yards. Rashee Rice, 2 catches, 20 yards. Kadarius Toney is actually the only guy that I would probably hold on to. Maybe Sky Moore, but probably Sky Moore as well. But Kadarius Toney is another guy that I would still hold on for at least another week or two, because when he's on the field, he gets targets. He ran 15 routes. He had 5 targets and 5 catches. Most people are running 30-plus routes in their games, right? Like 25, 30-plus routes. So you do the math there, and that's really good for Kadarius Toney. And even week 1, his horrendous week 1 that he had, it wasn't because he wasn't getting open and getting targets. It was because he just couldn't catch the ball. So I think they want Toney to be good. I just worry that, like, why aren't they using him more? Is it just you're slowly easing him in? He doesn't know the playbook. Like, he's more of a gadget guy. I don't know. I really don't know, and I don't completely understand. But Kadarius Toney, he's a guy I still want to hold on to. If after week 3 or 4 he's still getting the same usage of only like 20 snaps or something, then you could drop him. Travis Kelce came back, was on a snap count. He was still even Travis Kelce on a snap count is a top tier wide receiver tight end. He was tied for tight end 4 on the week, even on his snap count. 5 catches, 35 yards, got the touchdown. No questions with Kelce. And yeah, the only interesting note on this team was the whole wide receiver rant that I went on. So into the Jags. Disappointing, man. The Jaguars have been disappointing. I'm not patting myself on the back yet because it's only 2 weeks, but everyone was talking about the Jags and how they're going to be a top 5 offense and they're going to be one of the best offenses in the league. And Trevor Lawrence is going to take the next step and throw 40 touchdowns. And I was kind of like, I don't know about that. 2 weeks now where they haven't looked great offensively. I know they won week 1. They looked okay. But Trevor Lawrence, he was QB 29 this week, QB 22 on the season. So you probably drafted him as your QB1 pretty high, and you're a little disappointed right now. So obviously you're still going to start him. You're not going to drop him. They could easily bounce back and have good weeks, but a little concern there. I would maybe after another week, if he puts this up, I would start looking for someone else on the waiver wire to potentially stream over Lawrence. And that's just the truth. Travis Etienne didn't materialize into a good fantasy week, but he was basically out there on all the important snaps. He had 12 carries, 40 yards, 2 catches, 2 yards. He had a good week 1, a down week 2. It's going to happen every now and then for these guys, but the usage is there for Etienne. Don't worry about him at all. Tank Bigsby was considered to maybe be a goal line threat to Etienne, and that's not happening. Bigsby was not even in on the goal line. He only kind of saw work in the passing down, so you can drop Bigsby. He is a handcuff if you want to potentially hold on to him, but don't be worried about Etienne. Calvin Ridley, 2 catches, 32 yards. He did have 8 targets, so that's something to keep in mind. Like, I think he had a couple, like a touchdown called back or like almost touchdown where he was like caught it out of bounds or something. So don't worry about Ridley. It's going to happen every now and then. Even with the best players, you're going to get games like these. So still getting 8 targets is nice to see. We had a Christian Kirk bounce back week, 11 catches for 110 yards. He was the wide receiver 18. I mentioned that I didn't want to start Kirk this week, and that's fine. Like, I was wrong, but I didn't want to risk starting him and just him not really getting much like in week 1. But I also said I wasn't wanting to start Zay Jones after 1 week because I wanted to see, is Christian Kirk really going to be worked out of this offense? And the answer is no. And so Zay Jones, although I do think he had a weird stat line. I know he left the game, he came back, but he had a weird 6 targets and no catches, which is very, very strange. I still think Zay Jones deserves to be on rosters, and Zay Jones is going to hit. But in games where this team is going to be playing against good offensive teams, like the Chiefs, this team's going to be in 3 wide receiver sets a lot, and that's going to be good games for Christian Kirk. But when this team's playing a team like the Colts, where they're going to run the ball more, They're going to be in more. They're going to have more 2 tight ends or 2 running backs on the field. That's going to be more Zay Jones games. So you just got to think about the great game script and how that's going to play out. I think they came into this game expecting a shootout. It wasn't a shootout, but they still came in and prepared that way all week. And they said, we're in a shootout. We need our 3 wide receivers out there. So in other games, just keep an eye on other games. The game script for this team. It could be very game script for Zay Jones and Christian Kirk. And then Evan Ingram, 6 catches for 57 yards. That's kind of what you drafted him to be. He was the tight end 9, tight end 3 on the season. The reason I was against drafting Ingram, I knew he was going to put up a stat line like this most weeks, but it's not really moving the needle. It's like, yeah, he's tight end 3, but then you look at what that means, and that's 8.1 points per game. That's not great. It doesn't move the needle. So, yeah, that's it for the first 6 games. We're going to be back with the other 7 games. Hopefully some of this information helped looking a little bit beyond the number you see at the end of the day at the fantasy point number. Don't always chase that. I know fantasy points win games, but you got to look into how these were earned and why they were earned. So that's all I have for you guys. As always, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Catch you guys all next time.